Welcome to You with Intention. I'm your host, Cassandra, and this is the show where we help you divinely design your most intentional life. And we have some incredible guests, like the one we have today, who have done just that. And I have been sitting on this interview for way too long. I did it pretty early postpartum, and it's just taken me a minute to record all these intros and get everything set up. But it is always just an absolute pleasure and delight to speak with Rebecca Campbell. Her new book, Your Soul Had a Dream and Your Life Is It, was literally medicine to my postpartum soul. She talks about just these great initiations, and motherhood is a huge one that I went through while I was reading it. But I feel like this book is really just such a beautiful companion to any of us going through big initiations, big change, big moments of, healing our lineages, healing for the collective, evolving into a new identity. I cannot recommend it enough for you. Your soul had a dream, your life is it. I'll put all of the links below. Fun fact about Rebecca. Rebecca was actually one of my very first spiritual mentors. We worked together one-on-one like over a decade ago. So she has a really, really, really special place in my heart. She is the real deal, and it is just an honor and a blessing to share her wisdom with you. Many of you probably know Rebecca. She has many Hay House books out. I want to make sure they're all Hay House before. Yeah, they're all Hay House. I was like, oh. She's got a ton of books out with Hay House, starting with Light is the New Black, and her most recent one, Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It. She's got some gorgeous, gorgeous oracle decks out as well. I'll put the links for everything below so you can check her out. But she is just a high level spiritual teacher, light worker, just an incredible, incredible soul with so much wisdom to share here. So I know that if you're listening to this, you probably already know who she is. So let's just go into the interview. Oh my gosh, Rebecca, I'm so excited to have you back on. You're one of the first people that was on my podcast like eons ago.
What year was that? That was ages ago, wasn't it? I remember what house I was living in. I remember talking to you, but yeah, that was a very long time ago.
Oh my gosh,
But
so
I
long
also
ago.
feel like the last time we saw each other, you were in Glastonbury and you were talking about wanting to have a child, and now you've had a child.
And
What?
now I have a child, right? It's crazy.
And that wasn't that long ago, was it?
No.
It wasn't that long ago.
I mean, I think when we first met each other, neither of us were married yet.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't
I
married.
don't know if you
I
had
would have
married
just
Craig
been
yet.
married if I had. I met my
Yeah.
husband very soon after quitting my job in the corporate world. It's like
Okay.
he came straight after, and it was really weird because I was like, he didn't know who I was before, and he
Yeah.
was like, he's writing this book. As far as he was concerned, I was just like, he was going off to work, and I was just like doing something in like my share house bedroom all day long. Like he had no idea. I was always very like career driven, but I'd quit my job before I met him. So yeah, he came in pretty soon after. So maybe I hadn't. Yeah, maybe we weren't
I
married.
don't know.
Yeah. Mm.
If it was in the beginning, now 3 kids between us.
Oh my God.
So I'm so excited for your latest book. I feel like just from what I've gathered thus far, I feel like it's going to resonate with so many people. And it certainly, just from what I've read, it resonates with me and where I'm at right now in this kind of crazy
Mm.
postpartum journey. But I'm
Mm.
curious, um, as someone that I know has so much depth and so much, range of all of these different spiritual concepts and different things that you could pull on and share with the world, what what was evoked in you that was like, I need to talk about this right now? What inspired
Mm.
you?
Well, it began with a mystical experience that it literally opens the book, where I connected with an energy called the Great Cosmic Mother and then the ancient grandmothers of the earth, which my understanding of all of that, this is before I became a mom, and like I wasn't even sure if I wanted to be a mom. But what I really tapped into there was deep ancestral healing and the codes that we all carry from our ancestral lines. So, you probably would have heard the statistic or science statistic that we each spent 5 months within the womb of our grandmother and her grandmother and her grandmother and her grandmother, on and on and on, and it goes all the way back to the original mother. And this experience I had, which if anyone's watching rather than listening, behind me, I'm just moving my head, is it's an illustration which is actually from my oracle, the Starseed Oracle. And this is the Fall Into My Arms card, which was a visualization of that mystical experience that I had, which, that was back in 2017. And I really have been, over those 7 years, even more than 7 years now, been integrating ever since. After that, I moved to Glastonbury. I became a mum twice. The whole world has been going through some kind of collective dark night of the soul. I definitely went through a dark night of the soul where it felt like the earliest stages of awakening expanded and opened a lot within me. And I think all of us really who've been on an awakening journey, I do see it beginning with this ascent, like awakening of the mind, cracking open and stretching of the heart. For some of us, we have a physical Kundalini awakening where it's a rising up of energy, but it seems to be like an expansion or an upward motion. Then I entered into this phase of awakening that I've seen a lot of people in, and I think a lot of people are in right now, which I call the descent or dark night of the soul, where from what I'm seeing and have deeply experienced myself, it's as if the soul, the earlier stages of awakening have created this expansion, extra space, and the soul is coming more into the cells, into the body, back to the earth, back to humanity. And we're kind of forced to kind of turn back towards each other because we've been like turned against each other for so long. And we're seeing this with the division in the world right now. And so, to be honest, this book has written itself. It's not been a quick write, that's for sure. Like, the book was meant to come out. It was meant to come out, I think it was 2019 or 2021, something like that. And it was going to be called something else. And it just kept on revealing itself to me. And my process for writing is always receiving myself. Like, I'm a channel, and I ask, what do I need to hear today? And I kind of weave it together. Now, most of my books, I have a clear vision of what they're going to be. This one just kept on changing, but it was interesting because it was also changing while I was changing so much, postpartum, pregnancy, miscarriage as well for me. Like, it's a huge changes that the body goes through. While also, I had my son months, like 2 months before everyone went into lockdown. So at that time, like, my body was literally knitting soul into form. So I was receiving a lot of information from that, and these spiritual principles that I'd learned throughout on my spiritual path. It was as if, and maybe you've been experiencing this as well since pregnancy and becoming a mom, it was as if my body was physically, like, having a direct physical experience of these principles that I'd learned about and believed. But it was like, whoa, this is like actually physically experiencing them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's just the what? Pregnancy and birth and I mean, birth alone, just the labor, I think is its own mystical experience in ways.
Oh,
It's
it
it's
totally
just
is. And
absolutely wild.
so wild. And like, it, my experience of it is that birth and death, actually, but particularly birth, is like a blueprint for all of life, like, and the labor as well, like, and everyone has a different experience for sure, but there are, like, even I'm sure you like started like learning about the different phases of labor, active labor and all of that. I remember this one moment, and I did a lot of the writing as like while I was in labor, not active labor, that's for sure. But the days that I call like the in-between days, where you're not who you once were, and you're not who you're going to be. because
Uh,
let's face it, postpartum, like, it takes a long time. And it's
I
not ever about finding yourself again, because you're never going to be that person again. And that is a metaphor for life. It's a metaphor for change. We're ever changing beings living in an ever changing world. We're part of nature, not separate from it. All the harm that is happening in the world is because we've severed ourselves off from nature, which means we've severed ourselves off again from each other too. And, as someone who, is visible in the world in a similar way to that you are as well, I definitely have found that I don't know anyone who's not dealing with this in some way, as in, like, there's who we were, and maybe we've built a persona around that, whether we're a public figure or just a normal person who has an Instagram account, and we're putting that out into the world and saying, this is who I am. It's not true. But the moment we name who we are, we're already not that
Where it
person.
changed.
And then everyone projects who we were to us now, like, you've changed, like, that's not who you said you were. And you're like, of course I'm not that person. But then, like, you're also not who you're becoming. And
A-
so
Absolutely.
yeah.
And it's almost like we're constantly in the state of moving, which is
Mm,
like moving through. And I feel like, yeah, even for people like us, I feel like it's like really in your face because you have all of these, like, we'll call them online assets or whatever,
mm,
that are reflecting this identity to you. And you're like
mhm,
in the business of it. And
mhm,
it can be even, I don't want to say harder, it's just our experience. But then, like, I'm sure we both, I have clients where it's just their community, right? It's like their mom, their dad, their husband, like the moms at school drop off or whatnot, that just kind of know them as the lawyer or the
mm,
whatever. I don't know, like this like
mm,
identity that they've built, and they're like, well, that's not, maybe that doesn't feel like me anymore.
mm,
And
mm.
being in that, in a way, I feel like I was thinking about this a lot postpartum, because I feel like postpartum, at least for me, it's definitely been a dark night of the soul.
Mhm.
Of just feeling like, kind of like, birth in a lot of ways was like I said, it was like a mystical experience. That was my experience of it, where it
Mm,
was like this, ah, right? And
mm.
then it was like a crumbling of
Yeah.
just and not necessarily in like a depression sort of way, but in a like, I have no idea who I am anymore, and like have all these things to do that I'm not proficient at with a
Mhm.
baby and
Who's
figuring out.
screaming and my nervous system is on alert. Yeah.
My
I
nervous
don't know
system is
what to
like,
do. The moment that I think I've got this down, the baby
yeah.
changes and I'm like, what? I have no control on anything. And I don't know who I am. And my body is hurting.
Yes, yes. It's like, yeah, I don't recognize my body. I don't, you get so used to the things you're proficient at. But
Mm,
I was also just thinking, which I feel like, with your book and the people that you wrote it for, that I feel like life is really just like a succession of expansion, dark nights, evolving, expansion, dark
yeah,
nights, evolving. Yeah.
expansion, contraction. Exactly. Each time we expand, we contract. Each time we contract, we're able to expand more. And so, yeah, and this I think is what I meant when I'm like, it felt like the physical experience of birth and becoming a mother was like a physicalization of just like everything that I'd learned about mystical, like the sacred thread that's woven through all of life, and the seasons teach us that as well. And us, I believe us as souls, for whatever reason, we chose to be here now in this body at this time on this planet. And like, what a time it is. And it's a time where we are rubbing up against the fact that, like, this patriarchal society that we have all been living in, it's not men versus women, it's we have all been living in it. It is not sustainable. It's just not. And we have been going against nature, but not just nature as in the trees and the waters and all of that, which we have been, but our own true nature as well. And, as you know, the feminine as well, within all of us, we've been denying, attempting to be in full bloom constantly. Now, it's is not to mean that like there's not a time and a season for us to just go for it. And, there are periods where we're meant to hustle, but not forever. And it's actually in the contracting back that we can like develop the potency and the intimacy of listening to our soul's voice, listening to those deeper, deeper inner knowings to then boom, go out and expand again.
And to me, I think that that also speaks to having um, there's a level of trust and faith and like a core belief in the abundance of that will just kind of flow when you honor
Mm,
those different seasons that
hmm.
has been like fundamentally programmed out of us because
Yeah.
of society, right? That says, like, oh my God, well, if you're not on Instagram for 3 months or whatever, the world will forget about you or whatever. Or if
Right.
you don't, show up at the PTA meeting, then the moms are going to think
Hmm.
you don't care about the school or whatever,
Right.
like these like different things that like forces us into that unnatural shifting. And so so tell us a little bit about the book and how does this book kind of like walk us through this or introduce us to these concepts and how we can use them in our own struggles with evolving and whatnot.
Mm. Well, I mean, one of the invitations is to reflect on how you're changing, reflect on maybe things that have ended that you haven't actually fully ended in order to step into who you're becoming, whether that's like endings of friendships that you're still mourning because they've not been acknowledged, because there is no ceremony or way of speaking about it in this world. Um, and it also just invites you to enter into a direct experience with what I call the divine. So it's no longer like looking outside of yourself, looking above you. It's like looking for the sacred that's already here. And I think that this is one of the greatest invitations and gifts that the dark night of the soul gives us. As our soul comes in and in many cases it descends into the body where we're forced to face things that maybe we haven't before. It's like, whoa, things are really falling apart for me here, but they're things that were not sustainable in the first place, that we've been like running in overdrive trying to hold together. And so we'll descend into, okay, like, let me find my ground here, let me process what has been unprocessed, so that the ground that I am on is solid. So there's no falling, because there's this humbleness of like, I can find the ground. Oh, this is what's holding me.
Mm.
And when we can like, that's really the only place that we can truly rise from in a way that's like sustainable in any way.
I love how you talked about just the honoring of endings because I feel like that is something that just in general, a lot of us don't do enough. Like
Mm,
when we're in these seasons, it's so easy. And like, this is coming from someone that, like, I taught a lot of my programs are like manifesting, like, what's next? Like,
mm,
what are you calling in? Like, what's the vision that
mm,
your soul is calling you forward, right? But, but in that, right, in the burgeoning of the desire that comes in your heart for like what's maybe the next thing on your journey or what you're moving towards, right? Also inevitably comes a releasing of what was prior. And I feel
mm,
like that in between spot that you were talking about, right? Where you're like, I know that I'm not who I used to be. And maybe that has to do with friendships, maybe it has to do with career, maybe it's just a feeling of where you are on your spiritual path, right? But I also know that I'm not quite where am aiming to go. Do you
mm.
have any advice on how you would help someone navigate that, help them, if they're in that space? Let's just use a really like earthy example of like a job thing, right? Let's say
Mm.
someone is like working their 9 to 5 and they're like, I know that this chapter is ending and I'm ready to start my heart centered passion business, whatever that may be. But I'm kind of in that in between where maybe I'm still working at that job and I'm, um, starting that business on the weekends or
Mm.
something like that. How do we like honor that in between-ish?
Well, it's interesting because I literally have this example in the book on the chapter on endings. So it's
I'm
perfect.
psychic.
You are. Um, so I'm going to give you a real example of an honoring of an ending that I actually did, and it was for my really good friend Amy Firth. She was ending she'd just become an interfaith minister. She'd done lots of different trainings, but this was like the training, and it's like, it's time. I'm going to go out and start the business and, do all that. Like literally consciously change my path here. And she worked at a company called Unilever, and which it's on the Thames in London, which is like, it's iconic. It's such an amazing, amazing location, huge building. And I actually used to, when I worked in advertising, I used to go there because they were my client, and we never worked together. But yeah, and so I knew the building well. And so what we did was this: we all met, and we said that we would be in reception, and because it was like there was this glass elevator, you could see the elevators going up and down. And so what we were doing was literally honoring the ending of her walking out of that office, like she'd walked in and out, in and out, in and out for years and years and years, honoring by witnessing. So witnessing and acknowledging, so important to gather up our energy in order to step forward properly. So we watched her ride that elevator the last time, which was like, really, it was lovely, but it was funny as well because we're like, there she goes. And then she came, and we're all like, it's like this pack of like hippies in the foyer. And then we all walked out together, and we went to so right there was one of the iconic bridges, because it was on the Thames. And there's this little alcove that you could like look out on. So we were there. We had a thing of chalk, and we drew a line, and we witnessed her as she said her hopes and dreams. And first of all, she acknowledged what she was grateful for where she had been, and then her hopes and dreams for what she was stepping into, and like stating what she was stepping into. I am an interfaith minister. I leave this behind, basically. And we had the line on the ground in chalk, and she stepped over it, and we all cheered, and then I think drank some champagne or something like that. But yeah, that was how we honored that ending, which when you honor an ending, you're at the very same time honoring a new beginning, and you're
Yeah.
stepping into a new beginning. Might be the tiniest little inch into it, but you're doing so with your energy. You're not leaving energy in the past.
And is there a way that, because I'm thinking of just a couple clients that
Mm,
are in that space, but they're not quite ready, maybe financially, to take that leap to jump to
mm,
the 9 to 5. I'm curious
mm.
what your thought is. I know this is like pretty, in the business coaching world at least, it's pretty
That's
like
okay. Yeah.
controversial, right? Where
Mm,
there's like do I need to like leap and let the net appear? Do I need to like put that thing in the sand and like solidly say, okay, I'm done with this? And I know you've done this yourself too with
mm,
your
mm,
old career before you started writing your first book and jumping into this world, right? After being a creative director. And it's so, actually, you're a perfect example of this because
mm,
I feel you can see in your current business, at least I can see, like clearly how talented you were as a creative director because you just have such an eye, right?
mm,
And so it's clearly that was like a way your soul shined on some level, right? And then it
mhm.
now just elevated to a different way of using that gift and more gifts. How how do you feel about that? Do you feel like someone needs to fully close that door to fully open the next door, or do you think that there is that moment, whether it's a job or a friendship? Does it need to be like, okay, I'm closing that friendship, or is the energy too messy to be like, I'm just going to kind of let them be a periphery friend, or I'm just going to
Mm,
kind of work that job, but hustle for my business on the side?
mm. So I think it's obviously completely different from person to person, depending on circumstance. But I'm a big believer. Let's talk about the job first, and then we can go into the relationship. So with the job, I hope you can't hear my daughter crying
No,
back there, but hey, this is life.
yes.
Someone is with her. She's not on her own. It's like the mum scanning. Yeah. Okay. So with the job, I'm a big believer in like, don't like one big leap. What it looks like to everyone else is a huge leap. It's actually thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of baby steps. So, you know, I don't believe in this thing of like, you should just go for it. Otherwise, like you're not committed to it. I think it's about believing in what you're becoming and tending to what you're becoming without just like dismissing where you are, you know, and working out what you need in order to confidently leap in. Now, doing anything that the soul's calling us to do probably requires courage. Anything new does require courage. So it's not doing it without the need for courage, but it's just working out, what do you need to feel secure enough in order to be courageous. So for me, what I needed was, I needed to know what my business model was. I needed to have my website made. I needed to have enough savings so that I could spend at least 6 months writing a book that at that stage I didn't have a publisher for, in order to pay my rent and just live and all of that. I also needed an elevator pitch that I could tell my existing colleagues that I'd worked so hard to build a reputation around like my work and who I was. I wasn't going to go, I'm leaving to commune with spirit. No, I said, I've always had this dream to write a book. I was a copywriter, creative director. That made a logical sense. Oh, I don't know if you've had a dream within you, but I'm in this unique position in my life. I feel like if I don't do it now, it's like, will I get this window again? I said that. People respected it, spoke more about their secret dream than mine. And so that's what I needed in order to feel good. I also remember, and I'm sure you may resonate with this and people listening, where it's like when you know you're being called in a different direction, but you're still working the 9 to 5 job or whatever, and you're feeling a bit soul destroyed by it. It's like working out what your escape plan is. So for me, it was going from 5 days to 3 days, and then doing the leap. But also there was this one day where I came up with this analogy with a mentor I was working with at the time, where she said, it's like you need to ride 2 surfboards for a while and you'll know when to step over to the next. And I did, and I did, and I did. But had I just like leapt without like building that confidence up for myself, I don't know if I would have been as successful, you know, like, and nothing's ever wasted. Like you said, like the skills that you're developing, nothing's ever wasted, you know? I think as well, when you are doing that leap, but you're not quite there, it's easy to resent where you are. But my invitation, if you are there and you're kind of like struggling to stay where you are, but you're not quite ready to go, the practice of gratitude, of like being grateful for where you are has given you. So for example, I used to be walking into my office and being like, oh, this is the wrong direction for me. This isn't what I'm here for. So I reframed it, where each day I'd walk to work, I'd be like, I know exactly where I'm going. Maybe I don't know every step along the way, but I know that it's that surfboard, not that surfboard. And so what I'd imagine is every single step I took literally on my way to work, but every single step I took in my life was a step closer to where I was going and away from where I was and was in that moment as well. I'd also, as I would open the door to work, instead of like resenting it and feeling like, no, I need to be somewhere else, I would be like, wow, this job is getting me closer to being able to do that, because what I need is 6 months salary. So I'm getting that here. And so I was grateful rather than feeling like pulled in 2 different directions.
I love that. I often tell my clients that your current job is like the VC, like the investor for your future
Mm,
business, right? And if you
yes,
look at them like
beautiful.
that, then you're like, thank you for investing in my other business, right?
Right. Perfect.
I love that. I also love the walking. I feel like one
Mm,
of my favorite meditations is like the kind of like what you were doing, just like a like walking and just envisioning like walking into the future and like walking in the
mm,
direction of what is. Something about that, I think the embodiment and like really getting it into your physical being. Um,
amazing.
I want to talk about a little bit. Your book says um, it guides us through embracing new cycles and initiatory gateways. Can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit more about what are our initiatory gateways of life?
Mm. Well, there are many, like there are some that we go through, which is just based on like our actual journey, like age and other initiations, like, pregnancy, motherhood, getting our period, first love, first loss, first brush with death, all of these are our initiatory gateways. The first and last are the ones we two share, that we all share, which is birth and death. They are the gates of life, and they are the two that we share. But it's interesting, we don't really talk about that much, you know? And so I think that's really interesting. And then there's the personal initiations that we go through. I think life is always trying to initiate us into even more of who we truly are. And if we open our eyes to it, we will see that if we say yes to that initiation, it's us saying yes to change. It's us saying yes to breathing our way through those expansions and contractions.
Absolutely. I love that. And to look at, to me, that's also just looking at life is just a constant healing journey. It's just a constant, like, soul expanding journey. And I think there are actually feel free to disagree with me on this. But because I think sometimes in the spiritual world we feel like, oh, we have to do all of these things, right? But there's also, I think, yes, there's all these things we can do, right? And I love ritual and doing all this as much as anyone. But there's also, I feel like, this current that I feel like you're talking about that naturally moves through us through life, right? And would you consider that current our soul trying to live in our physical being and receive the lessons?
Mm. Yeah, I do think so. I see life as, obviously, it's the spiritual journey, the spiritual awakening process is life itself. Like it never ends. And I think that, well, I wonder if, like, part of the point of life and the point of the spiritual journey is to invite more and more of our soul into the body, into the physical, you know? And I think that these initiations that we have, whether it's through love and loss or um uh, you know gateways that we go through hormonally, like our body invites us and hurdles it steeper in, whether that's getting our period, midlife, menopause, perimenopause, postpartum, all of that. It invites us, I believe, for our soul to come more fully into the physical. And they're all contractions. But if you let the contraction happen, the expansion definitely follows. I know you've been through many of them in your life.
Yeah, and so many, so many. That's why I feel like Dark Nights of the Soul. I'm like, I laugh back on like probably our first like when our first interview or whatnot, or at least when I think of like some of my earlier interviews where I had the one Dark Night of the Soul, and I'm like, which
Yes.
one are you talking
Yeah.
about? I
It's so true. I
get a few.
know. I know. That's what I was like. I was like looking back and I'm like, oh my God. I actually think I understand the Dark Night of the Soul now. Like I've experienced it, but I've also studied it. And it was not one night. It was Dark Nights of the Soul. And I actually call them that in the book because it's never one night. And I look back at, like, yeah, when we would have been talking about them, maybe we use that phrase. My friend Robert Holden calls that dark nights of the ego. Like, it's like your perception or your heart or whatever, you're cracked open But the dark nights of the soul often come when you're like, oh my gosh, all of the things that used to work no longer do. The intimacy that I felt with the divine, the sacred, it's like it feels further away than before. And what's happening to me? Like you properly descend into the underworld of your body, of your childhood, of your ancestry, of humanity, of the earth. And this is why I think that collectively many of us are going through that right now. And I think it's imperative for many of us to do that. And maybe we do it in waves. I don't really know. But what I do know is that the earth doesn't need us to survive. We need her. And it is not about, in my opinion, and I know this is just a phrase, so I'm not kind of like pushing out the phrase or whatever, but the concept of like a new earth, for me, it's more about a new humanity. Because I don't actually think the earth needs to be new. I think the earth's ancient and great and knows exactly how to regenerate itself. But the question is, do we?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so from your studying of this, for someone that's listening to this and is like, that resonates so much with where I am right now, how do you think someone in their individual life can start to navigate their own dark night of the soul, navigate, that ancestral healing, navigate that coming back to nature, to their whole nature, and also the
Mm.
healing that's available in nature in general?
So the first thing I would say is if you are going through this descent, this dark night of the soul, I would just say your soul has everything it needs within you to get through it. And so really sticking to the grace, and I know when you're in it, that is a challenge in itself. So finding a practice, and I'm not even necessarily talking like it has to be meditation or anything like that. Finding a practice might be hand on heart. It might be tapping yourself like this, regulating yourself. It might literally be holding yourself like this. Finding a practice that helps you feel held when it feels like everything is falling apart. So you can rest back into that. Um, and yeah, and then I would just say, I do believe that there is intelligence to it because I think it is part of nature. So to recognize that there is an intelligence at play, go gently, be really gentle on yourself, but pay attention to how you are being initiated. Pay attention to what is arising. So, for example, for me, a lot of ancient grief, ancient rage erupted out of me after when I was in the postpartum for my son. Now, I look back and I'm like, oh, gosh, if I was born in a different era, people would say something very different about what I was going through. But knowing what I know, it was still so orientating for me. um, I know that it was the birth that opened up this portal, this connection to the power, but also the trauma of my ancestry, my ancestral line. And because I was open to it, for whatever reason, it wanted to be processed through me. And so that was my personal initiatory invitation. And I didn't have to say yes to it necessarily, but I did. Now, looking back, what I would say to myself in that situation is more and more so come back to your body, come back to your body. So when you feel the grief, when you feel the rage, when you re-experience memories, or whatever it is that is coming up, the emotions, let it move through your body. Don't stay stagnant. Don't stay in one place, and don't over process it, overthink it. Just it's energy, let it move through you. That's what I would say. Same thing with if anger, rage kind of comes up. Rage is one of the most sacred, holy energies. But particularly as women and men as well, just in a different way, we've been taught keep it down, keep it down. But it's where our power is. It's where we define our boundaries as well. And so finding healthy ways to express these deep seated emotions that are stored in our cells. And I don't know why exactly it's happening now, but I see it over and over again in my students that so many of us are processing the trauma of our ancestors. Maybe it's because of all the genocide that's happening around the world, the ecocide that we are scrolling through every single day. Maybe that's why. Or maybe it's because those of us, not all of us, but a lot of us have a level of safety, and you can't process things until you feel safe. I don't have the exact clarity of why this is happening, but I know it is happening. This expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. And with these emotions, you can't heal something that hasn't been felt. And I'm saying I know it's true in myself, and I see it over and over again. There are many of us who, for whatever reason, are being called to process the unprocessed.
I've also seen it a lot amongst my friends and clients, and also just, even in the like mom community, there's so much right now about postpartum rage.
Mm,
And I was thinking about that and have had a few of my own moments of just seeing like, I think for me, I feel like the rage in and the rage we feel in all the rage or intense emotions that we're feeling in all these aspects is also, I feel like the our souls or the feminine in us just like lashing out against a culture that is not supporting what we know to be true, right? And I feel
mm-hmm.
like even if you think of the very like kind of, what do you call, distilled practical, like being a new mom being angry because she feels undersupported, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because she's trying to do everything and, you know, doesn't have the community, right, that's meant to support her, that's meant to help her, that's meant to hold the baby so that she can use the restroom or take
Have
a
a
shower,
shower.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like the absolute like rage that can like boil in you, right, over a shower. I remember like one of the things like for me early on was simply like I would feel rage around like needing to like pee. Like I just needed to pee and I need someone to take the baby so that I could just pee without the baby, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
was like such a silly thing, like a somewhat silly thing, right? Like it's not like I could just pee with the baby or the baby could cry for 5 minutes and it would be okay. But like in my like new mom brain, I was like, I can't let the baby just cry alone. Right. And but when you like bring that down, it's like, what is that? It's like a deep inner knowing that it shouldn't be like this, that it doesn't
Right.
have to be like this, right?
Right.
That there was
Right.
like that was like a better way of doing this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
that yearning for like, you talk about like the grandmother line and the mother line, right? And how, in an ideal world, you'd have your grandmother and your mother and other grandmothers and mothers and other women in the tribe, there and holding and like helping during that period. And I think a lot of the things that's just like a microcosm it, right? But I think a lot of these intense feelings that are coming up are also, you know, reorienting us to perhaps, not healing ancestral trauma, but also reminding us of the ways our ancestors had it right too.
Totally.
And we've gotten
Totally.
so
And
far off.
yeah, and figuring out how, like, just voicing it, like doing something with the energy is revolutionary. I think even just expressing it gets it out of the cells. That was definitely for me. I mean, when it really, I had it a little bit with Goldie, but I had it like severely when I had Sonny. I had him just before everyone went into lockdown. There was racial reckoning, much needed. The world was literally on fire. Like there were bushfires everywhere. And my whole body at night was like a white hot volcano. It was so physical. It would just like bubble up and erupt out. I didn't know what to do with it. I screamed into pillows. It was just so much in me. And yeah, I look back now and I'm like, gosh, that could have stayed in my body, you know? I mean, it felt dangerous to let it out. I didn't know exactly how to do it. I mean, that's what I mean where I'm like, I would do it a little bit differently now. I'd be like, literally dance it out every day, put on the most angry, intense music, let it out, be with other people and scream it out. That's what I would do now if a dear friend of mine was going through that, but I didn't have that information there. That was a huge part of my initiation, and I know I'm gonna help women process that now in their own way. Um, but yeah, you're right. It's like, you can either create or destruct. So what are you gonna do with that rage? You can burn everything down, or you can create something new. This is creation, life force energy.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that idea. It's just, yeah, it's just energy. And I love how you're guiding us to not over intellectualize it
Mm.
and to just allow it to move through and allow it to. I mean, I feel like that, not to make this all about postpartum, but I feel like postpartum, it's like there are so many moments where you just cry, you know? and
Yes.
and it's not logical, and you don't even know what the flip you're crying about sometimes, like, and you're just like, I just am I I always cry in the
But you're
shower.
crying about, like, how much you love your baby and then how much you are really finding this difficulty. Like, the 2 at once. It's always the 2 at once, you know?
It's all of it. It's all of it. And that's like, one of my girlfriends in my mommy and me class who's not as like deep in the spiritual world as us was, texting our group and I was just like, it's okay. Like, just keep crying. Like, just let it go. And I'm like, if you need
Yeah.
to take a shower or a bath or go for a walk, like, just cry. Who cares what anyone thinks? Like, it's gonna feel so good to just let
Mm.
that energy like move through. And I feel like we
So
all we all need that permission, right?
mhm.
That permission that is part of this spiritual journey, that the spiritual journey that so many of us are on is not just sitting in meditation. It's not just the journaling, and it's even not just the rituals, right?
Mm,
It's
mm.
it's all of it. It's life itself, right?
Yeah, totally, totally. And yeah, I think even if motherhood's like invited me to do anything, it's to find ways to bring the sacred more into the everyday, like weave it deeper, like stitch it right down deep into the everyday.
Yes, yes. I'm so this is exactly what I feel like I'm also now weaving in more, and I want to ask you, for someone that's listening, because I know that at least in my audience and your audience too, both of our audiences are spiritual and entrepreneurs for a good amount of it, right? And so how do you take these concepts of navigating the dark nights of the soul, of being in these different points of our cycle, and how do you balance that as, in Kundalini yoga, they call it a householder, right? Like someone that needs to like show up in life, right?
Mm.
As a mom, as a business owner, as someone that needs an author and a creative. What does that look like for you? And how has that maybe looked differently at different stages of your journey?
Well, it's really interesting. I've spoken to a couple of different, particularly spiritual teachers who have been through this themselves, and they've asked me as well. And for me, I found showing up in service comforting when I was going through that period because it brought me into harmony with grace. Like it allowed me to feel held by something bigger than what I was going through. And I think that, they say that I can't remember where I saw this, but they say that gratitude isn't the highest vibration. It's actually authenticity. Now, authenticity is not just joy. Authenticity is like it's love and grief. It's that honesty of like, this is where I am, because you can find ground. There's harmony there. And so for me, I found showing up to work comforting because two reasons. One, I was entering into that space where I was held, and being in service, able to hold others, because I think I'd always allowed something else to come through me, and so I could surrender into that. And then I think the second reason I found it comforting was, I mean, I'm sure you'll relate in that when you're changing, when you're not quite sure who you are and you're not quite sure who you're becoming, being held by something that you know that's true or certain is comforting again, something that you enjoy, which I do enjoy my work. And I think that I'm not talking about like overworking, which I mean, I probably do like more than the average person find comfort in my work, and in the past, like I need to watch for overworking, you know. That's not what I'm talking about exactly. It's more like I know who I am when I'm doing that. And so for me, it actually held me. The thing that I think has been a very interesting process to go through, and it kind of touches on what we were saying before around like when you have like a, I hate calling it like a brand or a persona or a like people, you public figure, people think they know who you are, or you're projecting who you are. And then you go through these big periods of change. I found it really hard to navigate being authentic, as in this is what's happening, while also I genuinely wasn't called to share every moment of what was happening because I didn't think it was helpful to anyone. And I needed to be able to stabilize the energy in my system before, and I knew in a black and white way when it was time to do that. But there was this bit where it's, you know, it's the classic like rebirth analogy, the butterfly, right? When it's in the chrysalis, it's like if you were to slice it open, it's just gunk. And I didn't want to just share the gunk, you know? So I rested more into what I knew would be helpful to support people in while I was transforming and working out what is this gunk and what am I becoming. And then when I got the go ahead, then little by little started to. That's why releasing this book for me is such a big thing, and it's very personal compared to some of my other books. It's still loads of teaching all through it, but I share some really big things that I have and hadn't shared before. But I feel fine about it because I've lived with it for in such depth, and yeah, not pushed it out before I was ready.
Oh my gosh, I relate to every single thing you said so much
Mm.
because I feel like that's been, I think that is one of the struggles if you're someone that is a teacher or a coach, especially, um, or a therapist or someone like that in a position of service and helping other people. I think I also have danced with that all the time where it's like, there is that, I think in our culture authenticity is such a loaded word right now because there's like the authenticity of like if you're not sharing like all the all
The
the
full vulnerability and
yeah,
crying on
like
camera and yeah.
yes, yeah, like reels of people crying, right? Or I'm like, I'm
Yeah,
not thinking
yeah.
about my phone when I'm crying. I'm just crying.
I'm just like, you call that crying?
Right? I'm like, content. Wait, no. Um, content. It's like, no, I don't know. But I love how you said it. It's like, what's going to be of service? And I agree with that because I do think that, I relate to that so much right now. I started taking one-on-one clients again. And it's one of those things that just like like I'm just a channel. It grounds me in who I am. I feel of high service. It is like my very own like happy pill, right?
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
something, it's like in those moments when we feel like a lot is like shifting and changing, there still are those, like one of the things I always say is like on some level postpartum, I'm still very much myself. Like the
Mm-hmm.
me in here is still me, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
on another level, I'm like completely different, right? And it's like those core things that we have. And for us, I just because I think of our calling and our line of work that happens to be being of service and teaching, but for someone that's listening, like that could be anything. If like you feel like
Yeah.
yourself when you're cooking,
Do
cook,
it.
right? If you feel like yourself and you're playing like basketball with your friends, like play basketball. There will always be those kind of like anchor things that I think help hold you through the integration process. And I do
Mm,
think that when you're thinking of the this journey as a sacred process, like you said, right? Then there also comes that sacredness of who gets to witness it while
mm-hmm.
it's happening,
Right.
right? And you
Right.
get to decide who is, you know, able to hold that space for you to witness it. And sometimes that's not the
The
Instagram
world.
public.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think like the tendency and pressure for us to like share as it's happening turns it into performing, which takes us out of the what is actually happening. Like use that butterfly analogy. It's just like, really? Is the caterpillar going to be doing a meme or something like wild? Like they don't know what the hell is like everything is changing. Like if they distracted themselves and tried to like understand every single thing that was happening, and not just, of course we're going to try and understand it as it's happening for us, but there's a difference between inquiring into for ourselves, like being mirrored back with people in our life, professionals, loved ones, all of that, versus turning it into a teachable before you even know what the lesson is. Like that's not helpful. I mean, again, I hate saying things in a this is right, this is wrong way, because for some people, sharing the loss that they're going through or the heartbreak they're going through, it's not about that. But documenting every single moment of the journey or feeling like you need to just because you have before in your life, I think is damaging.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's, to go back to what you mentioned around the book and talking about um, you mentioned, you call it the mystery school of nature, which I
Mm.
love. Also, when we think about nature, like we think about the butterfly, we think about the trees, right? It's like they're very few things are in a constant season of outward, 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 outward,
Yeah.
right? Like maybe
Yeah.
an evergreen tree was the only thing that like came to my mind as contradictory, but like, but there's like that certain process, and I think our world again is like pushing us against that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because we're like, oh, you'll get more followers, more business, more whatever, right? If you just like push, 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 tell everything, show everything, except instead of honoring like, okay, maybe this is a winter, maybe this is a
Yes.
cave season, right? Maybe I'm hibernating this season or I'm healing this season, and there'll be that time to emerge, and having that trust and that faith. And last thing I'll say, you talk about in the book that you um, will help readers walk the sacred path of the mystic and walking that through their life. What does
Mm.
that look like for you in your life? What are the daily practices or the weekly or lunar practices that help anchor you when you're very like you have a full life, right? When all these other things are going on, right? And you're dealing with like the kids and family and friends and house stuff and business stuff. What are the things, the practices that you find like really kind of anchor you or like bring you back into that grounded flow?
Mm. Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, my definition of a mystic is anyone who wants to merge or be at one with, intimate with the sacred. So the quickest way I know how to do that is to see the sacred that's around you, and the best place for that is nature. So that's my go-to every single day of my life. Like even I just traveled to South Carolina. Like if I'm feeling ungrounded, it's because my feet haven't touched that earth. I haven't like actually landed and acknowledged the nature that's there. When you see the sacred, when you acknowledge the nature that's around you, your soul's able to like land more fully into your body, can take a breath. Nature is the best place I know to have a mystical experience. And a mystical experience is essentially entering into a state of awe or wonder. When we're in a state of awe or wonder, what happens is our soul comes more fully into our body, which means we feel more grounded. We also feel so much more connected with all of life, but also at the very same time, like insignificant because of the beauty and everything. So this pressure that we feel the moment before, where we're like, it's my job, I need to figure this out, da, da, da. Gazing into a flower, looking at a tree, watching a sunrise or set, the stars in the night sky, having a breath, all of a sudden, we can enter into our body deeper. We can calm deeper. You don't need to be spiritual to do that. The person I know who does that more than anyone I know is my dad. And my dad is like, with all the books that I've written, each new one I go, so dad, what do you reckon? Do you still reckon when you're dead, you're dead? And he's like, yeah. But he has mystical experiences every night sitting on his balcony watching the skies turn from blue to pink, Mm.
I love that. I love that. I think that was also part of our soul's journey, right? To have parents that are sometimes not so. That was definitely
Exactly.
in my
Being
soul's
like,
journey.
I don't get what you're talking about. What are you talking about? What are all these people saying? Oh my God, Rebecca. They're like, what? Do you mean Becky?
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. Nope. My parents are the same way. They're like, what you do? Like, what do you do again? I'm like, it's been like 12 years, guys. 12 years. You haven't figured it out?
So funny.
We're like, as
Love
long
it.
as you have health insurance, who cares, right? Yes, mom, I have health insurance. Yes, I do. Thank you.
So good.
Oh, Rebecca, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we wrap up about your book, that you want anyone to know, or
Yeah,
anything you feel called
just
listeners?
my book, Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It, is I think it's gonna be out by the time you listen to this. And if it's not, you can head over to rebeccacampbell.me/dream, and you'll find all like loads of bonuses and where to pre-order the book as well. You basically just go on to wherever you buy a book and it'll be there. Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It.
Yay! We'll put all the links below. Thank you all for
Thank you.
listening. And just a little note before we wrap up, Rebecca's book is now out because unfortunately it took me that long to post this interview. I apologize. So you can order it right now and get it sent straight to your house. All the links are below. Thanks for being here and be sure to subscribe.